The global market of today has a large potential for expanding businesses. However, with this potential comes a lot of risk. Different norms and cultures in different countries lead to a lapse in understanding and communication between people doing business. Edward T. Hall defined two different types of cultures: high context cultures and low context cultures. In order to successfully conduct business internationally, you need to do your homework. A strong understanding of the difference between these two cultures is essential to being able to communicate abroad. China has a high context culture in which people are deeply involved with each other. As a result of intimate relationships, people are hesitant to jump into commitment without establishing a strong connection, and individual inner feelings are assumed to be understood through simple messages with deep meaning. This is very different from the US, where people have a low context culture in which they are highly individualized. People are not deeply involved with each other. Because of this, people often communicate with messages containing explicit meanings. Let's look at a few scenarios of misunderstandings between a man from the US, Mr. Smith, and a man from China, Mr. Lee, conducting business. A few days into opening up his business, Mr. Smith needed to meet with the distributor to discuss a new partnership. After finding the number of Mr. Lee, Mr. Smith called him and explained the exciting new contract his team drafted up.
Would you like to meet within the next few days to discuss the contract further?
That would be interesting.
He was hooked, or so Mr. Smith thought. Mr. Smith wanted to nail down a time.
When can we meet?
This week is very busy.
It won't take long. We should meet tomorrow. Does 10 a.m. work?
I might be able to. I'll get back to you.
Mr. Smith assumed that the meeting would happen, but a whole day went by and Mr. Lee never contacted him. What did Mr. Smith do wrong? Cohesiveness in a high context culture often leads to commitment, meaning that a first promise or commitment often means the start of a serious relationship. People tend to be cautious or even reluctant to begin something without a strong relationship. After learning from his mistake, Mr. Smith wanted to build a more intimate relationship with his team members. A few weeks down the road, he wanted to set up a dinner with some of his team members on Saturday. He approached Miss Tong.
Can you come on Saturday for a dinner with the team?
I may be able to.
We'll see you at TGI Fridays then.
Well, actually, Saturday is a special day, you know.
And why is that?
It's my son's birthday.
Oh, happy birthday to the boy.
Thank you. I appreciate your understanding.
On Saturday, Miss Tong did not attend the dinner. But why? Mr. Smith assumed that Miss Tong had accepted his invitation because she never said no. In his eyes, she accepted it, but in her eyes, she denied it. The misunderstanding was that Mr. Smith was being direct in his question, while Miss Tong was being indirect in her refusal. People in high context cultures tend to not refuse their bosses directly in order to save their face. Miss Tong talked about her son's birthday in a sense of refusing the invitation politely, which was an indication that Mr. Smith did not catch. A few weeks down the road, Mr. Smith's business had grown and he had built a stronger relationship with Mr. Lee. He needed to place a large order for his company through Mr. Lee. The order was very important, so Mr. Smith wanted to receive it as soon as possible. He called Mr. Lee again.
I understand that this order normally would take 2 weeks. Is there any way that the period could be shortened to 1 week?
We could, but it would take a lot more work.
That would be perfect. I appreciate your dedication.
After the week went by, Mr. Lee shipped the order to Mr. Smith's office, but billed him extra cost. Mr. Smith was shocked. They had never agreed to a higher price, so why did Mr. Lee charge so much? In a high context culture such as China, there are a lot of unwritten rules and meanings that are not said or verbally expressed during communication, and conversations contain a lot of extra meanings that you don't even realize. Take a lot more work is an implication of an expected extra compensation. Chinese do not like to directly propose a request. Instead, they assume hard work would be recognized and rewarded automatically. These are only a handful of scenarios that a person from a low context culture doing business in China could encounter. With these few tips, you can save a lot of time and trouble in communication. So, if you're like Mr. Smith and conducting business in China, Here are a few recommendations you should keep in mind. Firstly, if you are looking for a business commitment or contract, a very direct request might not be wise. Establishing a strong relationship with your targeting business is a good starting step. Secondly, when you are asking a favor or inviting somebody to an event, you must keep in mind that they might avoid a direct rejection. Chinese people value harmony in the workplace. Polite and indirect refusals keep relationships intimate and should always be recognized. Lastly, there are a lot of assumptions behind explicit words in a high context culture. People may say one thing, but expect you to understand the meaning behind it. Don't simply take the explicit meaning out of somebody's words. Take their perspective into consideration to help you find out their implied meaning. Conducting international business can be difficult, but with the right preparation, it can be very advantageous as well.